Hello everyone and welcome to the Red Raptor Writes 20,000 subscribers special. Once again, I really need to thank every single one of you for viewing, subscribing, and generally supporting the channel. It's been such an honor and a blessing to have so many supporters. Really, I can't imagine how the past few years would have gone without the income from this channel. I know I don't talk about my personal life much, but I've been able to comfortably complete my student teaching when I couldn't work a job. I traveled to Arizona for a friend's wedding, and I was even able to propose to my epic girl boss girlfriend, all from the income I've made from my videos. Without you guys at home, I don't know, maybe I'd be in a gutter somewhere, so thank you so much. In an unplanned move, this works as a 300th video special too. Now, on to the 1993 classic, Jurassic Park. For those longtime viewers, you should remember how this ranked as high as number 3 on my list of favorite movies, only being beaten by Spider-Man 2 and Jaws. I can't even remember my first time watching it, since I've been a fan from the crib. Whether it is accurate or not has no bearing on my opinion of JP as a movie. This is a Hollywood blockbuster. Yeah, it's unfortunate that the general public are so uninformed about paleontology that they take a blockbuster as scientific fact. That's like using Fast and Furious to study physics. These aren't documentaries like Prehistoric Planet that are meant to educate. Nah, the main goal here is to entertain. By that standard, it succeeds tremendously. By scientific accuracy, well, it'll be fun to see how it stands. Before we get started, first, some ground rules. I'm not about to go through the deep archives of time to see what information was known or disputed in the 80s and 90s. That would be a nightmare. That means no outdated business. I'll start with general positives, general negatives, and then discuss each dinosaur individually. This will also serve as a part 1. There is way too much content to go over in one video. Since all that's out of the way, let's dig this up. Jurassic Park, even as a sci-fi Spielberg flick, still gets a lot right about dinosaurs, for its time of course. Next year marks that 30th anniversary. No matter what negatives I bring up later, nothing can take away from the fact that it revolutionized views on paleontology at the time. Since the dinosaur renaissance of the late 60s and 70s, ideas of warm-blooded, intelligent dinosaurs finally stuck in the scientific community, but that didn't translate to the public until 93. I mean, just look at The Land Before Time from 88. Dragging tails, kangaroo stances, and swamp loving, those filmmakers chose to stay in the past while Crichton, Spielberg, and Kep went beyond the mysterious beyond. Gone are the days of dragging tails. Every dinosaur here holds their tail upright, parallel to the ground. This is the natural position unless they decided to break their tails and break the tendons that help keep them upright. Also, we have lots of fossil trackways and predictably, they show footprints. No marks from a sloped tail. Another small detail comes when our protagonists meet the hatching Velociraptor. Well, Deinonychus, but we'll get there in part 2. Her body temperature is said to be 91 degrees. Not sure why they're using Fahrenheit off of Costa Rica, but regardless, Dr. Sattler asks and is reassured that they hold that body temperature. This means that Velociraptor and other dinosaurs are homeothermic and endothermic. They produce their own heat and are able to maintain a consistent body temperature despite external conditions. In layman's terms, they're warm-blooded like birds and mammals. This is unlike other modern reptiles that are ectothermic. Their body temperatures are dependent on the environment. This is why you'll see lizards basking in the sun to soak up warmth. Being warm or cold-blooded isn't a matter of black and white. Think more of a sliding scale, a gradient with lots of diversity in between. We do get some exaggeration here. More modern research would call most non-avian dinos mesothermic because while they can raise their own body temperature to more than the surrounding environment through internal metabolic processes, they aren't holding a fixed temperature, kinda just shooting upwards and hoping for the best. Giant sauropods were gigantothermic. They were so huge that they didn't need to worry about heat escaping. These gigantotherms would seem similar to homeothermic animals, keeping a high body temperature. Another line of evidence comes in the Brachiosaurus scene. With such an immense neck of 30 feet in length, holding the head high into the air, no second-rate reptilian heart would be able to efficiently pump enough oxygenated blood all the way to the top. Instead, dinosaurs probably had 4-chambered hearts like birds and mammals. In 2000 came the discovery of a Dilophosaurus heart with the expected complex 4 chambers. Further analysis suggests that what was thought to be preserved soft tissue is more likely a blob of sand that got stuck in the dead creature's chest cavity, so this theory can't be totally confirmed yet. Amphibians, along with the non-avian reptiles we see today, both have 3-chambered hearts. There's a left and right atrium and a singular ventricle. The left atrium receives oxygenated blood from the lungs, while the right atrium receives deoxygenated blood from the body. But because there's only one ventricle to send blood away to other parts, both atriums are sending their oxygenated and deoxygenated blood to the same ventricle, causing them to mix. A 4-chambered heart fixes this problem. Birds, mammals, and non-avian dinosaurs had a left ventricle and a right ventricle. This completely separates the blood so they don't mix. Fully deoxygenated blood goes to the lungs, and the fully oxygenated goes to the body. Long story short, we receive far more oxygen from our blood so we can be more active, more energetic. We can have higher metabolisms. So all this body heat talk isn't just here as background information, but is integral to understanding how an animal behaves, how it moves, how it survives. Warm-blooded animals like dinosaurs lived more active lives. This is perfectly shown in Jurassic Park with upright bodies, tails parallel to the ground, and faster, sustained locomotion. Good on JP for portraying these creatures so unconventionally at the time. Wow, okay, I really got lost on a tangent there. That stuff is important to know though. All of this ties into the idea that non-avian dinosaurs were more bird-like than what we think of as reptilian. Birds are modern-day dinosaurs. The film hammers this point multiple times. Not only were they warm-blooded, but Dr. Grant also points out how their bones were hollow, and how, again, like birds, their skeletons contained air sacs. This is ancestral to all Saurischian dinos, sauropods and theropods. Even the position of the velociraptor skeleton resembles that of birds. Commonly known as the death pose, it's caused by the decomposition process. When a dinosaur corpse decomposes, their ligaments begin to shrink and shrivel, squeezing the body into this position. The head and neck bend backwards, the tail flexes upwards, and limbs tuck in closer towards the body. The general takeaway, the main argument from Jurassic Park, is how similar non-avian dinosaurs were to their avian counterparts, and I think it does a fantastic job here. Despite being a pure entertainment Hollywood movie, Jurassic Park managed to revolutionize how people saw dinosaurs. Its influence still looms over paleoart to this day, probably for the worse since science has progressed a ton in the past 30 years. That's on top of all the inaccuracies known in its day. One such inaccuracy are the pronated wrists. Most dinosaurs were unable to rotate their wrists in such a way that their palms faced downwards. They held their hands in an inwards facing position as though they're about to clap. These dinos lack the flexibility to bend this valley girl way. Anyone who's watched my other accuracy reviews can tell you that this problem doesn't end here, plaguing many future releases. Also, while the prospect of bringing these creatures into the modern world sounds fun, it's impossible, at least with our current technology. Extracting ancient DNA from trapped Mesozoic mosquitoes is a creative way to do it, I'll give Crichton that. Whether it comes from amber or not, scientists know that DNA doesn't survive anywhere near long enough to clone a Dilophosaurus. The half-life of DNA has been calculated at 521 years, meaning after that amount of time, half of the bonds in the nucleotides will disappear. After another 521 years, another half of the surviving bonds disappear, and so on. At about 7 million years, every bond will be broken, but the sequence would be completely unreadable long before then. After 66 million years, yeah, there is no shot at finding any workable material. At best, maybe I'll get to see a saber-tooth, but definitely not a Tyrannosaurus. Another consistent problem throughout is the lack of feathering. While some paleontologists speculated their presence on the non-avian dinosaurs at the time, there was no hard, direct fossil evidence of feathers yet, though multiple examples will emerge throughout the 90s. Jurassic Park contained some obvious candidates for fluff. Like modern birds, there was plenty of variety in appearance and structure. Velociraptor, a dromaeosaurid, was very closely related to birds, and finds attributed to the actual genus directly confirm that they had well-developed wing feathers. A velociraptor forearm with quill knobs was discovered back in 2007. These were where the wing feathers anchored themselves. Gallimimus and Ornithomimid definitely had plumage as well. Several specimens of their close relative, Ornithomimus, show traces of longer, hair-like feathers throughout the body and even on their tails, with their legs covered in plain skin. Maybe they had complex, pennaceous feathers on their arms, though this is disputed. Scientists don't have any direct evidence of feathers on Dilophosaurus, but a trace fossil of a resting theropod about the same size from the same time is argued to show traces of downy fuzz. So it is very possible that Dilo and its relatives had feathers. Then there's Tyrannosaurus. Oh boy, I've covered this one before in my March and Walking with 3D reviews. Yeah, we can cross that bridge when we get there in part 2. Oh, and speaking of Tyrannosaurus, its name is spelled wrong. You can see several dino names in the embryo storage while Nedry steals them. Tyrannosaurus is missing an N. Stegosaurus 2 is spelled Stegosaurus. Come on, Jack Horner, couldn't you point out clearly misspelled names? What were you doing all this time? Oh, maybe just coming up with dumb scavenger theories or something. And my last two overall complaints are small nitpicks. First comes the lunch scene.
Dinosaurs and man, two species separated by 65 million years of evolution, have just been suddenly thrown back into the mix together.
Yeah, sorry Alan, but dinosaur is not a species. Dinosauria is a clade which contains the orders Saurischia and Ornithischia. All dinosaurs belong to one of these two orders within Dinosauria. A species would be Tyrannosaurus rex, Triceratops horridus, or Stegosaurus stenops. If you're gonna define man as Homo sapien, then okay, fair enough. That is a species. I know it's a nitpick, but it bothers me. Finally, the other nitpick. Throughout Jurassic Park, dinosaurs are stated to have gone extinct 65 million years ago. This is what every children's book from the time said, but more recent estimates place the famous KPG extinction event closer to 66 million years ago. Let's move on to each dinosaur individually. To keep this organized, I'll be covering them all in alphabetical order, which works out surprisingly well, considering I have the most to say about our last one. Our first animal, though, is coincidentally the first one we see in full, Brachiosaurus. Jurassic Park made this a household name beloved everywhere, but how well did the filmmakers stick to the science? Well, first and foremost, I gotta point out how what is called Brachiosaurus in film is actually based on Giraffa Titan. This isn't another Troodon situation, thankfully. Brachiosaurus is still a valid genus, don't worry. The confusion comes because for most of the 20th century, Giraffa titan was considered an African species of Brachiosaurus called B. bronchi. Actual Brachiosaurus from North America is known as B. altithorax. Since 1991, the African sauropod has been considered its own genus, Giraffa titan. Now it sits as a close relative to the true American Brachiosaurus. The split was caused by some subtle differences. Brachiosaurus possessed a longer tail, longer torso, arms positioned more laterally sticking out from the sides, and was an overall more robust animal. There is a partial skull, now considered Brachiosaurus, not as complete as Giraffatitan's, but the latter had a taller, less elongate crest, and a wider mouth, more similar to what we see in film. Even with their differences, because Giraffatitan is known from so much more material, it has often been used to fill in the blanks for the North American species. Between 1909 and 1912, several specimens were uncovered by German paleontologists in the Tanzanian Tendaguru beds. Why Germans? Because colonialism, that's why. Although being based on what is now Giraffatitan, that still gets it pretty close since they were such similar dinos. The body shape is noticeably different from other sauropods. Unlike contemporary Diplodocids and some future Titanosaurians, you see the strange limb proportions with the forelimbs being so much longer than the hind limbs, causing that very sloped back. The name Brachiosaurus literally means arm lizard in Greek. JP got this correct in the design, but not so much in the behavior. Many sauropods were probably able to rear up on their hind limbs, striking the famous pose we get here. Too bad Brachiosaurus is a brachiosaurid. With its strange proportions, their legs were too small and body too front heavy to pull this off. So the filmmakers essentially picked the exact wrong sauropod to do this with. This animal's feet also appear incorrect. We don't see them for long, so I had to go Tarantino mode and stare while they were on screen.
Yummy, yummy!
Feet.
From what I can tell, they look too elephantine. Unfortunately, this is common in a lot of dinosaur depictions. Sauropods had an interesting variety of feet. I can't believe those words just came out of my mouth. Each limb looks accurately columnous, but the toes are all wrong. The front feet should look like big fleshy pillars with a single large claw facing inwards. On the rear feet were technically 5 toes, but with only 3 toe claws visible, sticking outwards to the side. Okay, Dan Schneider, you can click away now, you creep. We're done with that. Another inaccuracy is its size. Brachiosaurus was giant, don't get me wrong, the largest dinosaur when discovered. However, it's much too big. Whether it's Brachie or Giraffatitan, they should reach a height of 12 meters. In its debut, John Hammond claims its neck length to be a correct 30 feet. So how do I know the model is too big? Well, the humerus. The arm lizard had pictures taken of its humerus next to the discoverer Elmer Riggs, being only slightly larger than him. The humerus in JP is clearly much larger than the human characters, even with them in the foreground. Yet another complaint is in the Brachiosaurus feeding scene. Grant wants us to see the giant as a big cow, but really most herbivorous dinosaurs couldn't chew, at least not in the same back and forth grinding motion. Sauropod mouths were designed to strip leaves off of branches, then chug them down. Their gut had the unfortunate job of processing all that foliage. Gastroliths, swallowed rocks, would help pulverize and grind all those leaves. But no, this is a hadrosaurid thing. My last problem here is with the positioning of the nostrils, only yet another nitpick. Traditionally, they're restored on top of the crest, a bad holdover from the amphibious sauropod reconstructions. It's unclear exactly where their external nostrils were located, whether it was in front or behind the nasal opening on the snout, but whatever the case, definitely not on the crest. Like a lot of reconstructions in this movie, a lot of the details may be off, but with the general idea behind them correct. We're in the right ballpark for sure. One significant win is how Brachiosaurus most likely did live in herds. We see them moving together and grazing together throughout the film's runtime.
They're moving in herds. They do move in herds.
This is certainly likely. Gregarious behavior in sauropods is thought to come in 2 forms. There are age-segregated groups, juveniles would stick together, as with the adults, and there are mixed-age groups. Remember, this is a very diverse clade of dinosaurs with many different genera, so don't expect them to all look and act the same. To back up these ideas, paleontologists have found trackways in Spain formed by a herd of young sauropod dinosaurs, showing an age-segregated group. What's also been discovered in Argentina is what appears to be a family of unnamed Brachiosaurids. At this site was a single adult accompanied by 2 juveniles, and it's worth mentioning that there's no evidence to suggest they simply washed up together. Nah, it seems like this family died together. So yes, Dr. Grant, they did move in herds. Going back to the dinosaur renaissance, learning how dinos were homeothermic and endothermic, Brachiosaurus is not shown as an aquatic swamp creature. Okay, we do see them in water, but in context they're just moving through it. Before the Renaissance, sauropods were thought to be confined to the water, being too heavy to support their own weight on land. Jurassic Park blows this idea out of the water with its fully terrestrial, large-bodied long neck. Heck, even Elmer Riggs, all the way back in 1904, suggested that they moved on land considering their hollow vertebrae, strong limbs, and lack of any aquatic adaptations whatsoever. Too bad his ideas didn't catch on until over half a century later. This dude was way ahead of his time. So Brachiosaurus, pretty good all things considered. Better as Giraffe Titan, but still good. Alright, no dancing around it. Dilophosaurus is the least accurate dinosaur in the whole movie, possibly even the entire series, although the Giga is really giving a run for its money.
He's ugly! 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 Ugly!
That's not to say I don't enjoy Dilo in the film, far from it. This theropod is a fantastic inclusion that really adds to the message of control, how the humans had no idea how these animals functioned, yet still tried to manage them anyways. No one could have predicted that they'd be poisonous from the fossils alone. Well, that's true in universe, but in reality, paleontologists can tell if an animal was venomous. Before we get into it though, let's discuss terms because Dilophosaurus falls into a weird gray area. The toxin it spits blinds victims on contact. Unlike poison, it's delivered from the animal, but unlike venom, it isn't injected. A new term for this has been made, now called a toxogen. So the toxogenous creature wouldn't be as random as Crichton and Kemp imagined. If paleontologists find a gland to hold venom, or in this case toxogen, and a system to deliver it, then they can reasonably determine that an animal was toxogenous. Take Eucambersia for example. I discussed it in my Walking with Monsters review. The skulls have a cavity in which a venom gland would be stored, a canal to transport the venom, and ridged teeth for injection. If Dilophosaurus could spit toxogens, scientists would have found the signs. Same goes with the frill. Just because scientists can't directly disprove an idea doesn't mean it holds any weight, but even then, you would expect to find some support structure like in a frilled lizard. That's already the 2 defining features of this dinosaur completely debunked. I feel so bad for all the experts who repeatedly get asked about these. Jurassic Park's portrayal is also way too small. She's a very small, maybe 2-meter predator here, but the real animal could have grown as long as 7 meters. Appearing in the early Jurassic around 193 million years ago, it was one of the earliest large-bodied theropods. The small size may be due to her being a youngling though. The movie gives us no other supporting evidence to determine this. One might argue that its hologram in Jurassic World was about the same size as a velociraptor, but that's from an unplanned sequel from over 20 years later. I want to know what Steven Spielberg was thinking at the time, not fan theories or retcons decades after.
Cause we don't care! Alright, my bad, y'all. I'm over here spazzing. We don't care, cuz we don't.
While this Dilophosaurus was never accurate, scientific depictions have changed somewhat substantially in recent years. In 2020, experts Adam Marsh and Timothy Rowe painstakingly studied every bit of material we have of the creature, painting it in a new light. Placement on the theropod family tree has been confusing, being a Coelophysoid, a Ceratosaurian, a Carnosaurian. Now it and its family Dilophosauridae are placed between Coelophysoids and other more derived theropods. But because it had that Coelophysoid label for so long and due to the incomplete nature of its fossils, the skull has long been reconstructed as more elongate and more gracile than it would have been. This led paleontologists for the longest time to view them as either scavengers or predators to only small prey. Marsh and Rowe's 2020 study, though, finds that they had a more robust skull with a deeper lower jaw and small kink in the upper jaw, allowing them to prey upon larger herbivores. Jurassic Park gives a boxier, more robust skull than what was thought at the time. Plus, it's only when the Dilo snarls at Nedry that we see the kink, so I guess I can give points for that. Maybe JP was ahead of its time for a change. Also, due to the lack of complete material, we don't actually know what those iconic crests even looked like. The most complete crest found in a large adult individual is still missing significant portions, so we have no idea how high and how far back they extended. The way they're reconstructed here, well, they're fairly large, especially compared to some Gracile reconstructions, and especially considering how she may still be a juvenile. Oh, and lastly, the JP Dilophosaurus only has 3 fingers, when the actual animal had a secret, tiny 4th finger. Since you'd barely see it regardless, I'll call this a nitpick. Alright, I'll end part 1 here. I've only discussed 2 editions in full, yet I'm already 6 pages in. We still need to get through Gallimimus, Parasaurolophus, Triceratops, Tyrannosaurus, and so much information on Velociraptor. It's gonna get crazy. So remember, if you enjoyed this video, to please leave a like, subscribe, and check out my social media. Stay tuned for part 2. See you then.